Alien girl laughed, sure he'd squeal. Then broke her hand on his abs of steel. The galactic commerce hub on Nexus Prime buzzed with the usual cacophony of 1,000 different species, conducting business. Towering spires of gleaming metal and glass stretched toward the burnt orange sky, interconnected by transparent walkways that crisscrossed the metropolis like a spider's web. It was here, in this melting pot of interstellar commerce, that the prior delegation had arrived to negotiate mining rights in the tourist sector. Commander Naira Vex strode purposefully through the diplomatic quarter, her bright orange skin a stark contrast to the muted grays and blues of the architecture. Her silvery white hair was pulled back in a high ponytail that swayed with each confident step as the head of security for the Cryon delegation. Now she had overseen 3 days of tense negotiations that had left her muscles knotted with stress. These human are impossible, she muttered to herself, recalling the stubborn Earth representative who had countered every Cryon demand with infuriating calm. They act as if they own the entire quadrant. The Creorans were warriors by nature and tradition. Their home world, with its punishing gravity and harsh climate, had forged them into one of the physically strongest species in the known galaxy. Naira herself could bench press 3 times her body weight without breaking a sweat, a fact she took considerable pride in seeking to burn off some frustration before. The next round of talks, she decided to explore the lower levels of the commerce hub. Her security detail had the delegation covered, and she needed space to clear her head as she wandered through the less polished corridors of the station's recreational sector. A rhythmic, clanging sound caught her attention. Following the noise, she came upon a small facility with a sign that read, Iron Paradise Gym Earth-Style Fitness. Through the transparent walls, she could see various exercise equipment and a handful of beings from different species attempting to use them. But what caught her eye was a lone human male in the corner, methodically lifting what appeared to be primitive metal weights. He was shirtless, his powerful torso glistening with sweat showcasing a perfectly sculpted abdomen. His light chestnut hair was cropped short military style, and a confident smirk played on his lips as he completed another repetition. Naira couldn't help but scoff. In an age of genetic optimization and nano-enhanced physiotherapy, this human was using crude metal discs to build muscle. It seemed absurdly inefficient. Curiosity piqued. She entered the facility. The human noticed her immediately, hard not to given her distinctive appearance, but continued his workout without breaking rhythm. What the hell is this human male doing lifting all that metal and iron? Naira asked loudly, not bothering to hide her mockery. Don't your people have proper strength augmentation chambers? The human set down his weights and turned to face her fully, his eyes a deep green that reminded Naira of the forest on her homeworld. Assessed her with calm interest. Sometimes the old ways work best, he replied, his voice deeper than she'd expected. I'm Captain John Reed, Earth Defense Force. He extended a hand, a human greeting custom she recognized but found unnecessary. Commander Nyrax Cryoran Elite Guard, she responded, ignoring his hand. Your method seems inefficient and primitive. John shrugged, seemingly unbothered by her dismissal. Maybe, but it works for me. He patted his abdomen, which Naira had to admit was impressively defined. These didn't come from a chamber. Please. Naira rolled her eyes. Cryoran children have stronger cores. Your species is physically inferior. It's just biology. Instead of taking offense, John's smirk widened into something challenging. Punch me in the stomach, he said calmly. Naira blinked, certain she'd misheard. What you heard me, punch me in the stomach. He repeated, his expression unchanged. If we're so inferior, it should be no problem for you. Naira laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. You'll drop to the floor screaming in pain. I don't want to cause a diplomatic incident. Go ahead, hit me, John insisted, standing with his arms slightly away from his body, presenting his midsection as a target. I won't file any complaints. Naira hesitated, then shrugged. If the human wanted a demonstration of Korean strength, who was to deny him? Besides, she was still irritated from the negotiations. Your funeral, she muttered, setting her stance and cocking her fist back. She didn't use her full strength, or she wasn't a monster, but she put enough force behind the punch to make her point. Her fist connected with his abdomen with a solid thud, and then pain exploded through her hand. Fuck. Nara screamed, cradling her injured hand. Against her chest, it felt like she'd punched a bulkhead. A tear of pain flashed in her eye as her face contorted in shock and disbelief. "What the how did you?" John hadn't even flinched. If anything, his smirk had grown more pronounced, like I say it sometimes. The old ways work best. He reached for a towel and draped it around his neck. "You might want to get." That hand looked at medical bay as on level 3. Nara stared at him, clutching her throbbing hand, completely reassessing the human before her. "That's not possible," she whispered. "No human should be that hard. There's a lot about humans you probably don't know." John replied, gathering his things. "Maybe you'd like to find out more over a drink after you get that hand fixed." Of course, Nara found herself nodding before she could think better of it. This human had just upended everything she thought she knew about their species, and despite the pain radiating from her likely broken hand, she was intrigued. "Fine," she said, trying to maintain some dignity. "One drink for scientific purposes." John's laugh was warm and genuine. "Of course, I'm purely scientific." As they walked toward the exit together, Nara couldn't help but steal another glance at his abdomen. What other surprises did humans have in store? The medical bay on level 3 was sleek and efficient, staffed by a mix of organic and synthetic medical personnel. A Taurian doctor with forearms expertly wrapped Nara's hand after confirming 2 fractured metacarpals. "How did this happen?" the doctor asked, his secondary eyes blinking. In curiosity, "Training accident?" Nara lied smoothly, ignoring John's poorly concealed smirk from across the room, once discharged with a regenerative bone stimulator attached to her hand. Nara found John waiting in the quarter. "The cosmic drift in an hour," he suggested, naming one of the station's more upscale lounges. "I owe you a drink for being such a good sport." "You owe me more than a drink for my broken hand," Nara retorted, but there was no real anger in her voice. "Fine, 1 hour." Back in her quarters, Nero received an encrypted message from General Draus, her commanding officer, and the head of Krieran. Military Intelligence Commander Vex. The holographic image of the stern-faced general materialized above her commune. "We have intelligence suggesting the humans are using these negotiations as cover for something else. They've been making unusual movements in the tourist sector for months. Your new mission: get close to their delegation. Find out what they're hiding and sabotage these talks if necessary. Kroran interests must be protected at all costs." Nara's stomach tightened. "Understood, General 1, more thing," Draos added, histone hardening. "We've detected your biometric signature in proximity to a human male captain, John Reed, Earth Defense Force. His profile suggests he's more than a simple soldier. Use this connection to your advantage. But remember, where your loyalties lie." The hologram flickered out, leaving Nara staring at empty space. She cursed under her breath. Of course they were, monitoring her, and now she had orders to spy on and potentially sabotage the very people she was supposed to be negotiating with in good faith, including John No. An hour later, she entered the Cosmic Drift, a lounge designed to mimic the view from a starship. Traveling at warp speed, the walls were transparent, showing the swirling colors of simulated hyperspace. John was already there now, dressed in civilian clothes that did little to hide his impressive physique. "Commander," he greeted her, standing as she approached. "You clean up nice." Nara had changed into a form-fitting outfit of Chlorian design, practical, yet elegant. "Captain," she acknowledged, sliding into the booth across from him. "I hope you've ordered something strong." "Terran whiskey for me and Cryorian fire wine for you," he said, gesturing to the drinks already on the table. "I did my homework." "Impressive," she admitted, taking a sip of the familiar burning liquid. "Not many non-Cryans can even pronounce the name of this drink, let alone order it correctly. I make it a point to learn about the cultures I interact with." John replied, his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken, especially when they intrigued me. Nara forced herself to remember her mission. Get close. Gather information. Sabotage if necessary. But as they talked, moving from diplomatic small talk to more personal subjects, she found herself genuinely enjoying his company. "So what really brings the Earth Defense Force to a trade negotiation?" she asked casually. "After their second round seems below your pay grade." John's expression shifted. "Subtly, I could ask you the same, Commander. The Cryorian Elite Guard doesn't typically handle mining rights discussions." They stared at each other, the unspoken understanding that neither was being entirely truthful hanging between them. Let's just say I'm here to protect Krioran interests. Nero offered, and I'm here to protect Earth's. John countered. A moment passed, then they both laughed, breaking the tension. We're both terrible liars, John said, shaking his head. Speak for yourself, Naira replied with a smirk. I'm an excellent liar there. Conversation was interrupted when John's comment buzzed. He checked it discreetly, his expression turning serious. I need to go, he said, standing abruptly. Duty calls. Problem. Naira asked, her intelligence training kicking in. John hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. There's a smuggling ring operating out of the station. We've been tracking them for months. They're moving weapons, grade materials, through the Taurus sector. The same sector your people want. Mining rights. Tanera's eyes widened. This aligned with intelligence reports she'd received about unusual activity in the sector. The Blacker Syndicate, she said. Without thinking, John's gaze sharpened. You know about them. They've been on our radar, too. She admitted they've hit Chlorian Outpost twice. In the past standard year, a silent communication passed between them, professional respect overriding their respective orders. I'm following up on a lead right now, John said. Wanna come? Every instinct told Naira this was dangerous, both professionally and personally. Getting further involved with a human could compromise her mission. But if the Blacker Syndicate was operating, here that was a threat to Krioran interest too. Lead the way, Captain. She decided as they left the lounge together. Naira was acutely aware of John's presence beside her, the way he moved with controlled power, the subtle scent of him that was distinctly human, yet not unpleasant, despite her mission and the complications. It presented, she couldn't deny, the growing attraction she felt, and judging by the way his eyes occasionally lingered on her, the feeling was mutual. Just so we're clear, she said as they entered a less populated section of the station. This doesn't mean I trust you. John's lips curved into that now familiar smirk. Wouldn't dream of it, Commander. But the way he said it with warmth underneath a professional facade made Naira wonder just how complicated this mission was about to become. The service corridors of Nexus Prime were a labyrinth of narrow passages dimly lit by strips of blue emergency lighting. John moved with surprising stealth for a man of his size, checking his handheld scanner periodically as they navigated deeper into the station's maintenance areas. The smugglers use these corridors to move contraband, he explained in a hushed voice. My intel suggests they have a drop point somewhere in Section 47B. Naira nodded, impressed, despite herself. Her broken hand throbbed, dullied beneath a medical wrap, a constant reminder of her underestimation of human physiology. She found herself studying John's movements, noting the efficient economy in each step, the alertness in his posture for a species she'd always considered physically inferior. He moved like a predator. Your military training is showing, Captain, she whispered. Not bad for a human. John glanced back at her, that infuriating half-smile playing on his lips. I'll take that as a compliment coming from a Chlorian elite guard. They reached a junction where the corridor split in 3 directions. John consulted his scanner. Frowning signals bouncing could be interference, or they might be using scramblers. Niraptor comm units. Witching to thermal imaging, nothing on heat signatures either. Your smugglers are good at covering their tracks. A sudden clang echoed from the corridor to their left, followed by voices. John reacted instantly, grabbing Naira's uninjured hand and pulling her toward a small maintenance closet set into the wall. In here, he hissed. Sliding the door open and tugging her inside. The closet was barely large enough for one person, let alone 2. Naira found herself pressed against Jay's chest. Their bodies flushed together in the tight space. The door slid shut with a soft hiss, plunging them into near darkness save for a thin strip of blue light seeping through the bottom of the door. Was this really necessary? Naira whispered, acutely aware of every point of contact between them. His body radiated heat, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her palm where it rested on his chest. Would you prefer to explain to a group of armed smugglers why we're sneaking around their territory? John replied, his breath warm against her ear. Naira had to concede, the point still. The closeness was distracting. In the dim light she could just make out the contours of his face, the strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes as they adjusted to the darkness outside. The voices grew louder, two males discussing shipment schedules in a dialect Nero recognized as Centurion. John tensed, listening intently. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her even closer, as he shifted to better hear the conversation. The movement brought their faces inches apart. Nera's breath caught in her throat. This close she could detect the subtle scent of him. Clean sweat, some kind of earth spice she couldn't identify, and something else uniquely human. It was not unpleasant. "They're talking about a major shipment," John whispered so softly she felt rather than heard the words. "Yeah, something big coming through in 2 days." Nera nodded, trying to focus on the intelligence rather than the feeling of his muscled torso pressed against hers. Her species ran hotter than humans, and the small space was quickly becoming uncomfortably warm. Or perhaps that was just her reaction to their proximity. The voices outside faded as the smugglers moved on. Still, neither of them made a move to leave their hiding place. In the silence, the tension between them seemed to thicken, becoming almost tangible. "We should go," Naira said, but made no attempt to move. "Probably," John agreed, his eyes dropping to her lips later. Naira wouldn't be able to say who moved first. Perhaps they both did. One moment they're staring at each other in the dim blue light, and the next his mouth was on hers. Hot and demanding, she responded, with equal fervor, her good hand sliding up to grip the back of his neck. The kiss was nothing like she'd expected. Krier and mating rituals were formalized, controlled affairs. Nothing like this raw, primal connection. John kissed like he did, everything else with confident precision and unexpected intensity. His hands moved to her waist, fingers pressing into the soft fabric of her outfit, pulling her impossibly closer when they finally broke apart. Both breathing heavily. Nera felt disoriented. This wasn't part of the mission. This wasn't what she was supposed to be doing with the enemy. Except he didn't feel like the enemy anymore, that was. She began, unsure how to categorize the experience. Unexpected. John suggested, his voice rougher than before. "I was going to say, not terrible for a human." Naira replied, attempting to regain some equilibrium through humor. John chuckled, the sound vibrating through his chest against hers. High praise indeed. His expression grew more serious. "We should probably talk about what's really going on here, Naira, between us and between our people." The use of her first name, without her rank, sent an unexpected thrill through her. But before she could respond, her common buzzed with an incoming message. Reluctantly, she pulled away enough to check it. "It's from my superior," she said, scanning the encrypted text. "He's demanding an update on my progress." The word felt bitter on her tongue. Now John's expression hardened slightly. "Your mission to spy on us. You mean?" Naira met his gaze directly. "Just as you're gathering intelligence on us, let's not pretend we're not both doing our jobs." "Captain John," he corrected after that kiss, "I think we're past formalities. Despite everything, her mission, her broken hand, the complications of interspecies diplomacy." Naira found herself smiling. "Perhaps we're John." He reached for the door control. "We should continue this conversation somewhere more private and comfortable," as they slipped out of the closet and back into the corridor. Naira knew she was crossing a line. Whatever happened next would change everything: her mission, her career, possibly even relations between their species. And yet, as John's hand found hers in the dim corridor, she couldn't bring herself to. Kerjay's quarters were Spartan, but comfortable, located in the Earth delegation section of the diplomatic wing. As the door slid shut behind them, the professional facade they'd both maintained in public dissolved. Their lips met again, more urgently this time, as if making up for lost time. "Your superiors would marshal you for this," Naira murmured, against his mouth, her good hand already working at the fastenings of his uniform jacket. "Probably," John agreed, his fingers tangling in her silvery hair, loosening it from its tight ponytail. "Worth it, though." What followed was a revelation. For Naira Krelleran, intimacy was typically performative, a display of physical prowess and endurance. This was something entirely different. Tender at times, fierce at others, but always focused on mutual pleasure, rather than demonstration of ability. John's hands explored her orange skin with reverent curiosity, treating each gasp and shiver as valuable intelligence. His lips traced the subtle ridges along her collarbone that distinguished her species, while she marveled at the unexpected softness of his skin, contrasted with the unyielding hardness of the muscles beneath. "How are you?" So she breathed, running, her palm over, his abdomen still amazed at the density of the muscle there. "Earth's gravity is 1.2 times Nexus. Primes," he explained between kisses, "were built differently. Plus, I work at it." Nara had never considered a human could be physically impressive, let alone desirable, yet here she was discovering that the differences between their species created a fascinating complementarity. His lower body temperature made his touch feel refreshingly cool against her naturally warmer skin. The slight variations in their anatomies led to unexpected pleasures. In the aftermath, they lay tangled in his sheets, her silver hair spread across his chest, her orange skin glowing with exertion. That was, Nara searched for the right words, not terrible for a human. John suggested with a grin. She laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "I may need to revise my assessment of your species' capabilities." "Happy to change your mind," he replied, tracing patterns on her shoulder, "though I'm pretty sure this violates about a dozen protocols on both sides." Reality began to intrude on their private moment. Nara thought of General Dryos, of her mission, of the consequences, of what she'd just done by Cryan standards. She'd committed treason by human standards too. Probably. "What are we doing, John?" she asked softly. Before he could answer, the room's emergency lighting flashed red and a piercing alarm sounded. Both of them were instantly alert. Military training overriding everything else. "Proximity alert," John said already. Reaching for his uniform, "Someone's trying to..." The explosion ripped through the outer door, sending them both flying off the bed. John hit the wall with a grunt of pain, while Nara rolled into a defensive crouch, naked and unarmed but ready to fight through. The smoke poured. 4 figures in black combat gear, faces obscured by tactical masks. The insignia on their shoulders, a black star on a field of crimson, identified them immediately. "Syndicate!" Nara shouted, diving for her discarded weapon belt. Jay was faster, rolling to his feet and charging the first intruder before they could bring their weapon to bear. His fist connected with the attacker's mask, with a sickening crunch, dropping them instantly. The second assailant fired the energy bolt, missing John by inches and scorching the wall behind him. Nara, having retrieved her sidearm, returned fire, catching the shooter in the shoulder and spinning them around. The third and fourth attackers split up, one engaging John in hand-to-hand, while the other took aim at Nara. She ducked behind the bed. Ace energy bolt sizzled through the air where she'd been standing. "John," she called, tossing him her backup blaster. He caught it one-handed while grappling with his opponent, then fired point-blank into the attacker's side. The syndicate operative crumpled. Nara was exchanging fire with the last intruder when she saw movement from the corner of her eye. The first attacker John had downed was back up, aiming directly at his exposed back. "Behind you," she screamed. But it was too late. The energy bolt caught John square between the shoulder blades. He staggered forward, face contorted in pain, hand collapsed to his knees. Something primal and protective erupted in the NRA with a war cry that would have made her ancestors proud. She vaulted over the bed and unleashed a barrage of fire at both remaining attackers, driving them back toward the shattered doorway. One fell, chest smoking from multiple hits. The other retreated, firing wildly as they disappeared into the corridor. Nara rushed to John, who lay face down and motionless on the floor. With gentle hands, she turned him over, dreading what she might find. His eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain, but alert. "Armor weave?" he gasped, gesturing to his back where the uniform had melted. But the skin beneath remained unburned. "Standard issue for EDF officers. Hurts like hell, though." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by the realization that they were both still very naked, and station security would be arriving any moment. "We need to move," she said, helping him to his feet. "This wasn't random. The syndicate knew exactly where to find you." John nodded grimly, wincing as he reached for his clothes. "Which means we've got a leak. Someone who knows about our investigation, or someone who knows about us," Nara added quickly, pulling on her own uniform. "My common pinged right before the attack. It was General Dryos ordering me to return to the Krioran embassy." Immediately, John's eyes narrowed. "You think your general is working with the syndicate? I don't know." Naira admitted, but the timing is suspicious, and if he is, I can't go back there. The station's security alarms were blaring now, and they could hear the pounding of boots. In the corridor outside, we need to disappear. John decided, pulling a hidden panel from the wall to reveal an emergency kit and several weapons, at least until we figure out who we can trust. Naira nodded, her mind racing. She'd just betrayed her mission, her superior, possibly her entire species. And yet, looking at John as he efficiently prepared for their escape, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Together. Then she said, accepting the blaster he handed her. His eyes met hers. Serious. But with that hint of a smile she was coming to cherish together, the underbelly of Nexus Prime was a stark contrast to the gleaming diplomatic quarters above here. The station showed its age, corroded pipes leaked coolant, flickering lights cast eerie shadows, and the air carried the musty scent of recycled atmosphere that had passed through too many filters for 3 days. Naira and John had navigated this labyrinth, evading both station,